So there's another class that we need to make that is going to help us generate the state of the Sudoku board and also figure out whether it's solved or not. This class is going to be called SudokuBoardStateManager. Let me go over the actual functionality of the methods. So the generate state is going to take each element of the Sudoku board and concatenate it all together in a huge string and then give it that string back. So the reason why we need to do this is so that we can figure out what the state was and what the state was before running the strategy and what it is after running the strategy, right? So that we can compare the states together and see, oh, something has changed. And we say state, but essentially it's basically the whole board. It's the state of the board. That's what we mean by the state. It's how it looks like after running the strategy or before or whenever we want to figure out how it looks like, we call this method. And the other one is to figure out, the one that's going to figure out whether it's solved or not, is going to figure out whether every single cell has been solved for or not. And that way we won't have to run any of the strategies. We can just alert the user and say, hey, your Sudoku board has been solved and you no longer have to worry about it. And now let's go ahead and create the class. So I'm going to go to workers, right click on that, new item, and then I'm going to say Sudoku Board State Manager. So we have the class. I'm going to create the methods. So string generate state, and then I'm going to say that, and then Sudoku board, and then the other one, I'll just leave it empty and then I'll fill it out afterwards. So bool is solved. And then I'm going to say, once again, it's taking in a Sudoku board. So the generate state one is basically, as I said, is going to loop around the entire Sudoku board and just put all the elements together and then give that back. We're going to use string builder for that. Remember that? String builder, key, new string builder. Actually, take that out. String builder, return key to string. There you go. Now we actually have, written some of the code already, and that's in the displayer, because the displayer has to go through the entire thing to figure out what each cell has in order to be able to print it, right? And we need the same functionality here, so we can actually get that here. We don't need these guys, and we're looping around through all the rows, through all the columns, and saying key.append, remember the append method, and saying append the Sudoku board's current rows, current column, the value of that current rows, current column. And that's it. This is how we're going to generate the state. Very simple, right? Grabbing each and every element, putting it inside of the key, which is the key, which is the string builder, and then appending it all together. So essentially, we're going to end up having the whole thing in a string, like all these values in a string. And that's going to be it. That's going to be our state. Now let's figure out whether it's solved or not. I'm actually going to grab this one more time. We don't need this. But in here we will say if Sudoku board row call is 0, or if Sudoku board row call value that we're going to convert to string, the length of that value is greater than 1, then we're going to return false. Otherwise, we're going to return true. So let's go over this real quick. What I'm doing is, once again, going through each and every element, through each and every row, through each and every column, right? And saying, if at a certain spot, I have a 0, because once this is converted, all the empty spots are going to turn into zeros. Remember that? When we go to file reader, this is what we do. So if it's empty, we convert that into a 0, right? So if we see that it is a 0, we know it's an empty spot, so it hasn't been solved for yet. So we know that it's not solved yet, so that's why we return false. But if we see that also there's something like this, that means that there is a range of possibilities that it can be. We still have to solve for all the possibilities and trim it down to a single value. And if it's not a single value, that means that there is still a range of possibilities that it can be. So we don't want to say that it's solved. That's why we're grabbing the current rows, current column, and then figuring out what the length of that is. And then if the length is greater than 1, then we say, you know what, then that's not what we want. For example, this guy would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 6 length, right? Length of 6. And that's definitely greater than 1, so then it's going to return false. So it's an or. So if it's a 0 or it's, one of these guys where there's a bunch of possibilities, then we return false. Otherwise, if none of these conditions have been met, then we're just going to simply return true. And that's going to tell us that the Sudoku puzzle has been solved. And that's it. This is our Sudoku board state manager. And now let's move on.